Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, and today we are going to discuss why the decline in bird populations, but the uptick in sea turtles, mid-size cold storage options for produce, and the big life mistake I almost made, or did I? We'll find out, so let's do it. All right, happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope you all are feeling fine at this midweek check-in. The mornings have been relatively chilly here, so I've been moving relatively slowly during those mornings, but got some good harvesting done yesterday, a little mowing as needed, some random odds and ends here or there. Nothing super exciting, but once you get past that little bit of cold, it's suddenly the nicest working temperatures ever, so I find myself just enjoying whatever it is I'm doing. It's a good time of year to get those jobs done that you've been avoiding because, well, at least if nothing else, it just feels nice to do them. I, for example, fixed part of my fence finally because I just wanted an excuse to be outside for a few more minutes. So cheers to that. All right. So today I thought we'd discuss a recent update to the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List, as you do on Wednesdays. This list is generally considered the international authority on species health. Basically, the report said some expletives. Okay, not exactly expletives, more like implied expletives, specifically that 61% of bird species are seeing declining populations, up from 44% in 2016. Now, that is a little misleading because it doesn't necessarily represent a nearly 20% jump in 10 years, but rather it represents better reporting. So effectively, we are just better able to tell how incredibly crappy birds are doing right now. A big percentage of the cause of this is deforestation. Birds, it turns out, need trees. So when we cut them down, the bird populations see natural rapid decline. Now, the nice thing about this is when managed thoughtfully, healthy forests can help rebound these populations quite effectively. Quoting the Times article on the report, quote, birds can recover when given the chance, as shown by two species from the island of Rodriguez in the Indian Ocean. Historically, forest clearing and livestock grazing decimated birds there, driving most to extinction. By the 1970s, the island's last two native bird species, the Rodriguez foti and the Rodriguez warbler, teetered on the brink with just a few breeding pairs each. But as conservationists stepped in to restore the forests, the birds came back. With this update, both species moved to least concern. That's fun. End quote. I love these sort of stories because it shows, yes, we make huge mistakes, like epic ones, but also that we can correct them with good ecological management. Of course, I don't need to sell anyone listening to this podcast on the importance of birds. They manage mosquitoes. They help protect trees and plants, which in turn protects our food and oxygen and water. They help the soil fertility. They help spread biodiversity through the spreading of seeds because they require a wide range of foods and habitats. Birds are also a reflection of the health of our planet, and the fact that they continue to decline isn't the type of thing you really want to see in that reflection. Another animal found to be sort of falling in this report were Arctic seals. This is important because their decline is largely due to the melting of sea ice. Planting more trees for the birds is an easy fix for them, but slowing the warming of the planet, albeit somewhat connected, is a much taller task and would require significantly more buy-in. Like governments and individuals all have to care. Again, these species declines are less about the specific species, like you do not have to be a seal or a bird fan to care, though you should be because both of those things rule. But yes, these declines are less about the specific species and more about what the species declines represent. They represent effectively a dying planet, a planet that's going to be a harder place to grow the things that we love, to sustain the birds and animals that we love, and to keep ourselves healthy. The big bright spot in this update is that populations of sea turtles are on the upswing, thanks, similar to those birds we mentioned earlier in the Rodriguez Island, in large part to conservation efforts. Better fishing gear, less hunting, more protection of nesting places, that sort of stuff. Caring works, but the doing part is required. We have to do. And that means some changes in the way we operate in this world. Because with the bird species, with the seals, go other species that rely on them. Again, it's not about the specific species. It's about what their decline says about how humans are doing as the stewards of this verdant planet. And frankly, we're not doing great, but there still is time to turn it around. So I hope we can all get behind farming and living in ways as much as possible that we can, help grow species richness and numbers. Remember the story I told on here about the diner with the time traveler where, they would go back and to pick up produce from a time when we could actually effectively grow produce at a decent price in a climate that was working. The thing the main character was fascinated by was not the food, not the time travel, but rather the fact that birds used to be real. I don't want that to be our future, where kids are looking up at you and saying, Grandpa, were birds real? Which, incidentally, is also my favorite four-word short story I ever wrote. Anyway, I know it's not cheery stuff, but there is a dash of hope in there too, because not only can we fix this course that we're on, we can make this planet abundant and better than it ever has been in our lifetimes through good ecological stewardship. I don't know. What say you all? Let us know in the comments section. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, cold storage between a fridge and a walk-in cooler, cold storage. I mean, you don't put them between. It'll make sense in a minute. BRB.
Hey guys, this is Wilder Roots here in Weaverville, North Carolina. We just got our cover crops in of rye, winter peas, and crimson clover. Our tomatoes in the tunnel are just about done, so we just seeded up some lettuce to cover those beds. And over here we've got peas and oats, so we can break into this early spring. Cheers.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. In fact, a lot of times I see somebody sign up to be a Patreon member and then immediately ask a question because they know I'm hanging out there ready to answer your questions. Anyway, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Mira Rosenblatt, who writes, quote, I finally found a place that has advice for those of us growing in the South. I'm in Mississippi, and it was refreshing to see that your book spent a whole segment on sweet potatoes as well as gave advice for growing through the heat of the summer. I hope we start to see more small-scale produce farms like yours here in Mississippi. We have such a long growing season, a rich gardening history, and so many food deserts throughout the state. Thank you for all you're doing. Thanks. You're welcome. I'm looking to expand our homestead into selling at the farmer's market next spring, and I'm putting in a small area, about 300 feet total, of 30-inch beds, to grow an assortment of veggies. My question is about cold storage of produce. Is there a step between stuffing veggies in the family fridge until market and having a walk-in cooler? Getting a walk-in feels like a big investment for my size, but I don't think all the lettuce, carrots, etc. will fit in the family fridge. Get another fridge, maybe? Thank you, end quote. Okay, great question here. Thank you. So first, I should say that when I started growing, there were almost no resources for growers in the South either. Luckily, we had Pam Dalling, who writes for Growing for Market magazine, and that was helpful, but most of the growing information, especially as it pertained to small-scale biointensive vegetable production, was coming from the North and or, the Pacific Northwest, which wasn't always helpful to me. In fact, when we first envisioned no-till growers, we thought about kind of splitting it into 4 or 5 groups. One like cold climate, warm climate, arid climate, subtropical climate, and tropical climate or something like that. You could possibly also add high altitude in there. You could do it by regions, but whatever. The reality is that we did not and do not have the money to really dive into that level of nuance, but it would be rad because sure, maybe someone in, say, Southern California or Northern Ontario or wherever you may be can glean some tips from my work here in Kentucky Zone 6B sometimes, but they probably would get a lot more out of a grower from their climate. And that person doesn't always exist in an accessible way. And as I've said before, I think AI is going to increasingly make it less worth creating context-specific content by oversaturating the content creator space with plagiarized content. So in my opinion, that fact is only going to get worse, unfortunately. Anyway, storage. Yes. So there are options between another fridge and a walk-in cooler, but those can also be affordable as well. In fact, a fridge on its own can handle quite a bit of produce. So it could be as simple as buying 1 or 2 older fridges and using those for storage. Some fridges you can even change the temperatures on. So in theory, you could even store something like tomatoes and potatoes longer term in a smaller fridge. But the simplest option, in my opinion, is just to find a room, a closet, or just build an insulated box in a barn or a garage and shove a CoolBot and AC unit in there. The CoolBot system is pretty simple and it converts an AC unit into a compressor. I know there are some alternative options that you can find online, but we've had our CoolBot box for like 10 years now or so. so. And beyond having to replace a couple cords over the years and a few AC units, it's still cranking away out there. Then you just match the AC unit to the square footage that you need. For me, I love having a legit walk-in, but we also just built the box in the barn on our last farm, and it was highly functional as well. We store our seeds there. We can harvest a day early if need be to beat the rain and or spread out the workflow. It can keep squash good to go all week as we harvest it every morning, and we have to harvest it, put it in the cooler, that sort of stuff. So because you are starting a farmer's market, I might consider a larger area for cooling, just in case you want to expand one day. Worst case scenario, you just have an awesome cooler for anything from aging wine to dry aging beef and so on. I will say that a CoolBot setup can be more affordable than most of the restaurant style fridges as well, but it is also worth keeping an eye out for those sort of like 2-door fridges that you see at restaurants, and or speaking with a restaurant supply company just to see what they have in stock. Sometimes a restaurant will go out of business locally and you can, snag a fridge for a fairly reasonable price. Getting it fixed can be a challenge, like when it breaks down, which also makes the CoolBot a nice option because they're pretty easy to troubleshoot and fix on your own. But those 2-door, restaurant fridges are for sure an option if you can get a good price on them. Also, in terms of food safety, you do want to get it out of your family fridge if you're going to be selling it at market. Just, if there's meat and stuff going in there or, spoiled whatever, leftovers, you don't want that mingling with the produce that you're going to be selling at market. All right. I hope that was helpful. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, that time I almost did a thing I probably would regret at least a little bit now. That's a good intro. Be right back.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
So life is funny because so much of it is just straight up luck. Luck what family you're born into, luck where you're born, luck how good your parents are at parenting, luck what coaches, teachers, and classmates that you get growing up, and sometimes luck just choosing the right or wrong thing to do with your life. I grew up fairly poor and with a single mother who had her demons, but she definitely cared and tried. Plus, I mostly had good adults in my life, so by and large, I think I certainly lucked out in that way. Then when I grew up, I was inches away from making a decision that, in retrospect, would have been really difficult one for me to deal with now, and I feel lucky in a way that I didn't go in that direction. Specifically, I almost dedicated my entire life to alcohol, which, as someone who no longer drinks, would be incredibly awkward. Now, I've talked a bit about this before, but there was a time when I was in deep talks with a vigneron in France, somebody who makes wine in the vineyards, about moving there and being that person's apprentice with the goal of being a winemaker one day. I wanted to start a winery, a brewery, a distillery, something along those lines. Even when I decided against moving to France to learn winemaking and instead came, home to Kentucky to learn to farm, I still wanted to start a winery. Like, it was still banging around in my head that this, it would maybe be like a fruit winery or something, but still. Then I just fell in love with growing veggies, and over time fell less in love with alcohol and more in love with food and soil and nerdery. The thing is, though, I was close. I was starting on business plans and scheming up ways to make an organic fruit winery a thing. Today, though, it isn't just that I don't drink anymore, that I'm glad I didn't go that route. I suppose I could still run that business without drinking, though I could have also probably just as well sold it. But I'm also glad, just because alcohol sales are on the decline nationwide. Fewer young people are drinking, so it would be a really hard business. This is partly because of an uptick in general sobriety, but also in saturation. There is more competition from seltzers and other drinks than there used to be for a declining market. To be clear, I still think wine can be amazing even if I don't drink it. It's a special, nerdy, microbial concoction that in many ways shaped human history, ditto beer. The microbial interactions required to make wine are absolutely fascinating to me, and I spent a significant amount of time trying to understand the different types of fermentation, of yeasts, of how it all worked and created amazing flavors. But now I think back to how close I was to being a winemaker, to dedicating my life to a product I no longer consume, and wonder what the lesson is from that. And I don't know that I have a great lesson, but I do think there is something to be said for when you get to that point in your life where you get to make decisions about who you are and what you do, choosing to focus on something that you and the world needs, like food, more than something the world actively wants to quit sometimes, like alcohol, is a really important moment. Again, who knows? Maybe I would have built something cool and could have, just sold it and moved on to something else when I decided to quit drinking. Or like I've argued for folks in similar positions before, maybe I would have just pivoted to mocktails sales and juice making or something. Who knows? But I'm thankful that I focused on food. Hard to say how long I'll be able to do it just physically, but at least I know I'm never going to quit food. That to me seems like a good approach to choosing a business. Choose something that even when I decide I no longer want to do the work or I no longer can do the work, I will always enjoy that product. Not sure if that was a fully formed thought, but what do you all think? Did you almost go down a career path that you look back and think, whew? I'm sure there are more than just paths I could have taken that were just alcohol for me, but wine and beer were huge parts of my life. Deep down, though, I knew I would probably back away from that at some point, but I didn't really think teetotaling would be such a widespread phenomenon. That is the type of stuff that is much harder to predict. Anyway, I think Wednesday and this rant are both done. Thank you all for this weird platform that I get, where I get to just like ruminate on these weird ideas banging around in my head in real time. So shouts to that. But don't forget, if you want to support no-till growers or that fact, you can do that because we are now officially a nonprofit 501c3. So donations, they're tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. That's my water break. That gets me ready for the story at the end. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Finding Ground and Rachel Phillips. Good stuff. Thank you all for signing up. It keeps this story going. So as you will remember, our dancer, Raj, was hit by a car tragically, and as a result, lost his legs. Raj had spent his whole life, swing dancer and teaching swing and all these things. And he took this incredibly hard at first, as anyone would. But the one thing he always loved about swing was the mixture of, the set moves, but with the improvisation. He started to think about his loss of legs just as another situation that needed some creativity, some improvisation. He started figuring out ways to not only get around efficiently, but even ways to dance. Indeed, he was now dancing in his chair, using his arms in ways he hadn't before, and started even coaching other people who were also reliant on wheelchairs or canes or crutches to find a way to dance, to enjoy music and enjoy being out. It was a whole world he'd never seen, and he began to fall in love with it, with the new friends, with figuring out ways to introduce them to swing. But in the back of his mind was always his doctor's words, that this doctor knew people who could, quote unquote, grow legs. One day he decided to give the number on the back of the card that the doctor had given him a call. What could be the worst thing that happened? That is for tomorrow on the regenerative dance. Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.